to welcome you all. And Monique, thank you. Thank you for the work you do for the Institute. And, as you were talking, I feel like I was getting on a Virgin intergalactic flight. Uh, so thank you for that. What I want to do is,
As I'm welcoming you all, I want to invite you to the chat. And in the chat, please put where you're zooming in from, where you're logging in from, the city, location, the geography. If you do know the indigenous communities that were there or who were stewards of that land before the name of that is named now, name them. If you know, no pressure. If you don't know, yes, hey, good to see. Oh, nice, Nevada, Ontario, Pennsylvania, yes, Boston, yes, Michigan.
just to get a sense for where we're coming from. Yeah, so good. And as we just acknowledge the full geographical convergence that is happening now, we somewhat have the entire U.S. At least geographically represented here, and our Canadian kin as well. So welcome. My name is Dr. Angel Acosta. You can call me Dr. Angel, Dr. Acosta, Angel. And my role today is to be a host and to really welcome my sister Arawana. And then also you'll meet one of our dear fellows, Nicole Chase, in a moment. Welcoming, just using embodied practices to welcoming the unknown. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just take just a few moments just to frame today's gathering, and then I'll invite Nicole to share a little bit of how riveted she was by reading Arawana's book, and she'll actually ask Arawana some questions, and then we'll sit and listen to Arawana just for a little bit, but we'll plunge into practice. We'll have some deep practice. So today's really about practice. I see today really as a celebration. This is kind of like an impromptu birthday party for Arawana's book. In the chat, I'm going to. She's humble, so I need to do this for her. But in the chat, I have put the link to her new book, Making a True Move. And it is a beautiful expedition and exploration of social presence in theater and her decades of practice and research. And so today I really want to appreciate you, Arawana, but also unapologetically, shamelessly plugging the book. So allow me to just frame today's conversation. If you attune your ears to what's happening historically right now, you can get a sense that we're going through a rocky period in human history. If you attune your ears even more, you would get a sense that we are experiencing multiple levels of crises. At one level, we have an ecological one where we are struggling as a species to be in right relationship with Mother Earth in terms of understanding that there is a limit to the resources that we can consume, and that there are consequences in the form of primarily climate-related ramifications. to to the ways that we consume the world. So there is an ecological crisis. There is a health crisis with the pandemic, COVID-19, producing the very conditions that even bring us together in this Zoom call where we're not in front of each other by way of the disruption that the pandemic has generated already a year in, exactly a year in. A year ago, shelter in place notices were declared across many states. So on some level, today is a birthday celebration of Arawana's book, but it's also a commemoration of a year where our worlds were turned upside down. Our bodies were turned upside down. So as we look and think about embodied practices to welcome the unknown, we're also almost reflecting on how our bodies have had to welcome the unknown over the last year. So we'll definitely go into practice in a moment. So I'll just say a couple more things. And in the field of generative social fields, awareness-based systems change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, healing-centered education, there's this feeling of a focus on the body, embodied practices, embodied social justice. And Arawana, with her extensive experience, comes to us from a long lineage of practitioners who have reminded us of this incredible instrument that we have as a body. I met Arawana years ago at the Academy for Contemplative Leadership in Mind and Life. And I remember vividly her introducing me to so many different vocabulary, like a whole vocabulary around the social body and the different levels of bodies that we embody. And I just want to thank her for that introduction. And I do feel that she's influenced me in a profound way in terms of how I show up to spaces and to my space called my body. With that being said, I would love to invite Nicole and Nicole Chase, oh, wonderful yoga practitioner, wonderful teacher, wonderful fellow doing work nationally. She is one of our Garrison Institute Fellows, and she will be with me in conversation with Arawana. And Nicole will just spark us off with a little bit of dialogue and to help Arawana step into some responding to some questions, and then we'll go into practice.
Thank you, Angel, so very much for the kind introduction and for having me today. Arawana, it is such a tremendous honor to be here with you. I completely was overcome with how much your book impacted me and the way that I thought about the tapping into the somatic intelligence of being embodied itself, and then also using the body in group settings with practices to be able to get a sense of the social body. It's truly profound. It's truly profound and wonderful. And so thank you so much for writing this groundbreaking book and for your groundbreaking work that you've been doing for many, many years. So part of what I love about the book so much is all of the incredible stories that you tell about using this work with different groups. One of the stories that I was really taken with was the story about the work that you did with Diego Rivera at the Ricardo Dutra, excuse me, at the Ricardo Rivera Learning Complex in Los Angeles, and about how these students were able to see through taking Polaroids of themselves in moving through practice, how they were able to get a sense of the social systems that they live within and to not feel so alone. So I guess my question for you is, I would love to hear you elaborate on one of the stories within the book, or also ask if there are any stories that you weren't able to get into the book that really maybe surprised you, helps to kind of unlock this, the power of this work that you're doing with social presencing theater.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you, Angel and Monique, for this invitation, and to all of you that have taken the time to join us today. So let me think about a story. There are many people that are applying this in organizations, and yet my own work is more specifically around with social change, or with in education. So I'm thinking, I guess, that comes to my mind just because it's more recently told, is this story of being able to bring, so if we use the young people as an example, the practices have to do with making visible that this body, and on this earth's body, and the social body, that relationship is highly visible. The body is visible, and the word theater, the root of the word theater, is a place where something becomes visible. That it's connected to the word behold, and that's its root meaning. And so if we think about the story with the high school students, what the practices did there, or do, is it brings to the surface the feeling quality of their social body, of the social body, of the relationship body, which is not visible. That's the invisible part. The social field is the invisible, or the interiority, let's say, of a social body. A social body, like right now, even though we're in this Zoom world, and therefore the bodiness of our being together is not as grounded, let's say, in feeling as it might be if we were in the same room in Garrison's beautiful space. But the feeling quality we have with one another, like if we just look about, there's a sense of each other. There's a feeling quality, which is the social field. With the young people, this quality of richness and connection within their social, like their social environment, the quality of that was very heightened by doing the practices together, by how they attend to one another with positive regard, with a shared creative process, with a little bit of support in telling their story. And I think that no matter what practices, there's a series of 8 of these practices in social presencing theater in the work. But with all of them, whether it's in this case or recently, our colleague Manish Srivastava used this method in exploring the migrant, just, the tragedy of all these people in India who were working in cities and service positions, who lost their jobs because of COVID and had to walk with their families home to their villages. This giant kind of crisis, social crisis, and how he for instance, through setting up just a little bit of social sculpture of one embodiment of the migrants, one embodiment of, let's say, decision makers, people who have power. This could be government, corporates, and one embodiment of, he wanted to explore his role as a change maker, as an awareness-based change maker, that he did not get trapped in either activism or in kind of overwhelm and apathy. How was he going to use his influence in a way that was full of awareness and compassion without this trap of blame and shame? How could he set this up? And so we set up a little social presencing theater practice with him. And the fourth player there, besides the migrants themselves and the government power, people with power in the system, and then sort of his population, which he felt were called, he called them those who had influence, or those who could make some kind of change. We also put in this player who held the highest aspiration of the system. What would be the wisdom, the most sane, compassionate, the basic goodness of that system? What would that be? Like, who could hold that position? And oftentimes, as Angel referred to, we also often put in the earth as a player. The earth is a stakeholder, as he reminded us. And then these, we position ourselves and as the story, and then we tune into, what does this feel like? If we drop the story, what happened, who did this to whom, basically, and stay with the feeling quality, and I don't mean the emotions particularly, I mean the felt sense of my role within the interdependency of the others. And I suspend, in other words, this is the unknown part. I actually don't know, but I stay with the feeling of the body, my body, and the social body, the social sculpture as it moves, really attending this body, this hand, this back, this neck, these legs, like, where do they want to go? Where do we want as a collective to move to that isn't what we think, but it's how the body, sensing body, knows? So whether it's a story like that, or with the young people, there are different practices. It's in that arena of our inquiry and our, we want the wisdom on this planet to come out. And much of it is the synchronization of the mind and body, whether that's individual or whether it's the collective body mind. It needs to be synchronized in order for our full intelligence, our full heartfeltness, kindness, and compassion, in terms of our own skillful action, our own, what we call the true move. In order for the true move, whether that's speech or action, there has to be this alignment, this embodied presence. So I hope that's that was what you asked.
Absolutely. Wonderful stories. And I think that is a wonderful overview of the work that you do, and helps to get people who are not even familiar with what you do to kind of drop into it, to really get a sense of it with your words. I have another question for you. So with this work that you've been doing, and especially in the over the last year that we've been living through together.
Mm.
What are the practices, personal practices and collective practices that you have been using within social presencing theater to help to keep you in an embodied state, in a state that is sensing into what is going on in the social sphere? I have a sense of the kinds of practices that you might be using, but what do the combination of practices look like? And also maybe how has it perhaps shifted a little bit during this time? Have there been other ways that you have been engaging with the practices that you didn't previously?
Definitely other ways. I must have say a year ago, I thought this is not possible. It's not, I've been in studios with people with bodies for many, many decades. And I did not think it was, I didn't think it was going to be possible to do much. But the wonderful thing about working with the Presencing Institute is that it's always an invitation to try stuff. There's always a sense that we need we as a collective, we need to be connected. We need to feel embodied, and therefore, how are we going to do that? So it was a great invitation to quickly try things out, and much of our work again in the Presencing Institute is very much co-created. So it's a team of folks that say, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this online? Particularly the ensemble work. So yes, I mean we'll try a few maybe here in our time together, but it was really using this. We very early on decided it's not about how to come up with some kind of adaptation that how to adapt this to something else. But very quickly we tried to let that go and just say, if we didn't know anything and we just started, this was our setup, what would we make? So it was very much about that approach, I think. And there are some things that we haven't been able to make, and we still experiment. And luckily we have a big community of eager experimenters who are trying this out in practice groups, and they set up their own, we have this Monday afternoon social presencing theater jam group, and people drop in and they say, well, I need to try this out, or I'm working in this context. What do you think? And how could we work with something? So it's very much, in a way, like the theater, of people getting together and making stuff up and seeing if it can be useful. And yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I do have one more question, if you would indulge me in this. I would love for you to maybe speak to this, as speaking of theater and kind of this framing of the work that you do. You speak about this concept of ma, and it comes from the Japanese, I think it comes from the arts, and it's applied in other contexts as well. And it's this idea of the interval or the space or the gap in between things. I love the way that you speak about it in the book, and the way that you say that it influenced your work in social presencing theater. I just wonder if you might speak a little bit to that, and also maybe say how it helps you to develop social presencing theater, and maybe how it continues to inspire and evolve the practices.
Oh. So before I met Otto Scharmer, who many of you know is the person who articulates this change theory U, and Presencing Institute has this group of change makers or who apply this change methodology. That's been the kind of home for this work since I stepped in, which was in 2003. But before that time, my whole life has been in dance and in the theater. And so very early on, I was an improviser. That's one part of my interest in life. You know, how groups of people make something out of nothing that's not about cleverness or showing off, you know, in terms of, I mean, much of dance improvisation you just don't want to see because it's completely indulgent and some person expressing themselves, which is lovely for a limited amount of time, but after a while one probably tires of that. So, and groups working together can also be can lose their freshness. So I was interested in the 1970s when I started studying meditation. I was interested in something coming from nothing. I was interested in freshness and in open space. That space expressed itself in a certain way. So the Ma was something that I came to my attention probably in the early 1970s. And it looks like this, if you can see. You see this, the kanji for this, Japanese kanji for that? Can you see? So this is a gate, a tori gate, right? And this is the sun coming through. So this principle that between things, there could be a gap, a space. So I can be talking along and then there's a little gap, right? And in the space, there's some kind of shared knowing. And this became, as you say, Nicole, a concept within architecture and tea ceremony and whatnot. But I was particularly interested in the films of Ozu, these early Japanese filmmakers who you know, they had a fixed camera, they had domestic scene, and literally they could just leave the camera on a person sitting there drinking a tea for a long period of time. The sense of just space that came into the work. So this has been big inquiry of mine for, you know, and I don't speak Japanese or read Japanese, so there's much probably that I don't know. And I often feel I'm just touching the surface of the profundity of the principle. But it has very much influenced our work in social presencing theater, this sense of not knowing and a gap of space with the sun coming through with some kind of warmth, some kind of clarity and brilliance that comes through any moment of life. And it's recognizing that that is natural, not something that we need to pump up or doesn't need a lot of training. It's just everybody can notice that once it's, you know, once it's pointed out, the openness of any moment. So our work emphasizes that quality. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for that. And Nicole, I want to give you an opportunity to just any mirroring there. I just want to she shared so much there. So just wanted to give you an opportunity before we transition to practice. Anything coming up for you there?
Well, first of all, thank you for that framing and speaking about Ma. I think that it's even more impactful hearing it from you, hearing your words, hearing it spoken, feeling it embodied within you. And I love how this principle of Ma and the way that you're talking about it, and the social presencing theater work that you do, it kind of is this gap, this space of curiosity and openness where the sacred and the mundane can live together.
Hmm.
And I think that is so beautiful, and you so beautifully talk about it. So thank you for being here, for inspiring me, and I look forward to doing practices with you.
Yeah. And just want to say one thing. We're gonna go. So the rest of our time together was practice. So Monique, you can put us. You can unpin us. We'll all be pinned on some levels now. And so I wanna make sure that you all feel comfortable, and this space is for exploration. So just know that the rest of our time together, it's an attempt to almost channel the brilliance that comes through Arawana into practice. With that being said, Arawana, I'd love for you to welcomes us into some practice, and then yeah.
Sure. I think we'll just start in a simple way, in the way that we would with any group of people that were interested in this kind of work. And let's just say we have maybe I'll talk in threes. We have an embodied presence and grounded with the earth, right? That's a practice that many of us spend a lot of time in our thought world. Most of us probably get paid to think and to talk. And so it's good to have a little designated time for embodiment practice, even if it's, and particularly in our case, it's without having an agenda, without having a goal, without trying to improve oneself or keep fit or follow a traditional form. All of these are good things to do. But we found that it's also good to just have a check-in. Like, how is this body that I'm living in, how is it doing today? That kind of thing. And so we'll start there. So it has a little bit of personal practice. And then I'm going to move that into, and I'm going to use the method called mindfulness, right? So mindfulness is just the mind's ability. If this is mindfulness, right? Everybody's mind has some ability to attend. We're going to place it somewhere. That's what's called mindfulness. Here's an aspect of mind called mindfulness, and it rests somewhere. It can rest. And then it oftentimes dances off, as we know, and it starts to think about something else. And the practice is that when awareness, these two things work together, awareness notices, right? Awareness notices that mindfulness is not resting somewhere, let's say on the feeling of the body or on the breathing or wherever you're resting mindfulness. It comes loose, right? It just boop, it jumps off and starts to think about something that happened yesterday or when you were a child or tomorrow and worrying about this and that, or just making some kind of comment about your current experience. I like it. I don't like it. This is good. This is not. This is whatever. That's this mental activity. When awareness notices, whoop, we can place it back on resting, right? So it's both moving, it's resting, and we have awareness. Awareness knows whether it's moving or resting. So if you're going to cultivate a little bit of embodied presence, you're going to need a little bit of resting on the body. So we're going to start there for individual practice. The second part of our work is probably then this, what we would call an expanded kind of, or more open awareness that takes us not only in our own home, our own body home, but allows us then to feel at home in our environment. That could include others in our social bodies, or it can include things, or nature, or our home, our home spaces that we actually feel, and the feeling quality of this. We see things, they're visible, the curtain, in my case, I'm looking out the window, my glass of water, you see things, you move around, but you also they have a feel, they have a quality as well, right? So first is individual, then is expanding awareness. And the third thing is this sense of what the language of presencing is called an emerging future. The word presencing is a made-up word combining presence and sensing. That the embodied being, ourselves, we have incredible ability to sense. And much of our work is the cultivation of this intelligence. It's highly intelligent, our sensing ability, and oftentimes underdeveloped and undervalued. And that sensing is from embodiment. It's a sense of something. And presencing is an ability to be with this very moment in such a way, or with a kind of depth of experience, which allows us to notice what is emerging. Of course, it has a view that what is creative, what is innovative, what is emerging in our social situation has these positive qualities of what it is to be a human with other humans. If we thought what was emerging is going to be a worse mess than what we've already got going, then that we wouldn't be interested in an emerging future particularly. But it's based on this feeling that individual people and groups of people are basically kind, sane, compassionate, wise, courageous, that is what it is to be a human. It's basically good to be a human being. And groups of people, whether it's families or our teams at work, our organizations, that at the core, underneath all the problems and conflicts and misunderstandings and treating each other badly, underneath all of that, there's potential of human wisdom and creativity, that we have the potential and the capacity to create a good human society in harmony with nature, with animals and all beings, for our children and grandchildren and on into the generations. So the work of Presencing Institute and our work with social presencing theater is, how do we tap into that? How do we recognize it? How do we cultivate that? And in my case, it's specifically through this embodiment work, right? So that's the introduction. So let's start with just a simple practice of sitting and a little bit of moving and stillness. And some of you I see are familiar and are a little familiar with this, but it's probably might be new for others. you certainly do not need to be looking at the screen. You could be moving away. You could be being off the screen. I would ask that you're close enough that you could hear the instruction. Okay. So we're going to start with just a little sitting. It's often the way we start in every meeting in Presencing Institute. We just sit a bit, and that's sometimes we frame that, and probably you also frame that as landing, just an ability to just, we have many Zoom calls, we have many meetings, we have many responsibilities, and it's good to just sit still for a moment and just feel how we feel. So that's where we're going to start. And I'm going to ask you, if you can, to sit up in your chair so that you're not leaning back on it, just to have a little bit of support for wakefulness and for a posture which is a little bit more balanced, that you're holding up your own weight with your core body. So if you, hopefully you can arrange yourself on your chair so that your feet are flat on the floor. And that you feel that you're sitting right on your chair without leaning back. And I'm going to ask you to bring your attention to your low body, to the feet on the ground and the seat. And actually take a moment to feel your place on the land that you live. That you feel your place on the planet right now. That each of us has our own spot right now on the planet where our body is resting, living, dwelling. And that we can feel grounded there, that however many pounds or we weigh, whatever our weight, it's resting. And our attention is in the low body and its connection to the earth. So it just means that you're putting your attention there, your mindfulness there. And when other thoughts pop to mind, that's fine. We just don't pay any attention to that. Just bring our attention to this low body connected to the earth body, this good Mother Earth body. And the Mother Earth body is always holding on to us. Otherwise we would drift off into space. You feel the belly. You can certainly work with your breathing if you want to, but it's more that you feel that this body is very grounded. The back of the body is present, the strength of the back. I'm really going to emphasize this back body. That you feel that your back and the space behind your body is present. The top of your head, the crown. Is in some conversation with the sky, with open space, without limit, without boundaries. Spacious and vast. so that you feel that your body joins the earth and the sky, both grounded and open. And then just take a moment to feel your heart. The appreciation and gratefulness, and here in New York, we have sunshine and a little bit of warmth today. Wherever you are, this sense of an appreciative heart, a glad heart. And also a heart of sorrow, sadness, that feels the loss and confusion, or it feels the suffering in this world. So the fullness of heart, both a joyful and a sad heart. So this is a sense of embodiment, that we just take a moment to feel the fullness of our body. We let our mind's attention rest there. And also noting that our own presence, our own embodied presence, our own authentic presence it radiates. It's not just stuck in our skin, right? But it's very communicative to others. This quality of presence, it radiates out to the back, sides, and front. That others can feel our presence. And some say that this felt presence is a lot more powerful than what we say. So just take a moment and rest there just for a minute or two. This simple practice of embodied presence. When thoughts arise, we just let them go and let our attention drop back into the body. So I'm going to ask you to add a little movement now. So we've been still, which is a shape, just resting shape, but it can be any kind of stillness. In this case, it's a still sitting shape. I'm going to ask you in a still stay sitting to make a movement, and it can be anything. This still sitting shape begins to move. So now your attention is on the movement. Just whatever you'd like to do, stretch or bend or whatever, just do a movement. You feel your body moving, shoulders or waist or neck or whatever. And then let that come to a rest so that you're stopping shape. Okay? Once more. Moving. What does this shape want to do? Whatever that body shape wants to do, move there. Start to move. You're taking an interest in what is it that the body would like to do now. And then if you could just pause in a shape, wherever you are, that's perfect. Once more, begin moving. It can be just part of the body or more feeling of the whole body. Either one is fine. And then if you could just rest in a shape. Good. So I'm going to ask you to continue this for a little bit. Just you can go standing, you can go on the floor, lying on the floor, which is where we normally would start if we were doing more of a workshop situation, but whatever is comfortable for you. You're sitting in your chair if that's all you'd like, but if you want to stand or lie down on the floor or whatever, I'm going to ask you to continue with mindfulness of body practice, either moving or still. Okay? Whatever you want to do, you're just loyal to the body, faithful to your body. What does the body want to do? And when you have thoughts about that or anything else, just let those go. By all means, you can go off the camera if you'd like, just near your place so you can hear when we finish. We're going to do this for 5 minutes or so. It's basic embodiment. Can you stay in the body without any agenda? You're not trying to improve yourself. What does the body want to do? And make certain that you really pause in a nice long shape of resting. Let your body really rest with the shape. And then what does that shape want to do next? And then you begin to move. Whatever your experience is, you just welcome that. It doesn't matter what it is. Just make certain you have nice long shapes, pauses. We talked about the pause earlier. We have an empty shape, a little gap between the movements. Certainly keep your eyes closed if that's comfortable for you. Just really taking an interest in this felt sense of the body. What does the neck feel like? What about the jaw? What about the hands and low back, the knees? Please take the next minute, just find an ending to your practice, which means you just stop somewhere along the line and you just end and rest in your ending shape. Just rest there so that you have a somewhat formal ending. Say, this is the end of this little practice. And again, making certain that the back of your body is present. That you can feel that the back of the head and neck are present. Space behind your heart is present. The middle, low back, buttocks to the backs of the legs and heels. The back is present, the space behind the body is present, and the front can relax. Perfect. So please come back to your seat, and if you have a little, if you have a pencil or pen and paper or a little journal where you're taking notes, if you could just reflect a moment on your last few minutes of life here. What did you notice? Maybe something that you did or something that you felt. It's as though if your body could give you a little message. Your body says, dear, Bill, or dear Fran, or dear Emily. What would your body say? What would it say? A little message that it would like to. It's a check-in, right? So you have a check-in with your body. And then oftentimes in a check-in, we do a little harvest. You say, well, what happened? Take a moment and just make some notes for yourself about this. It's a kind of listening in a non-judgmental way. I see lots of us are not visible, so I have no idea what you're doing there. Maybe not, but if you can make a few notes, that would be great. And if you have anything you'd like to say to the group or share with the group, you're always more than welcome, or questions. Something that you noticed in terms of this topic, the first topic, which is this embodiment or embodied presence. Oh, beautiful. Someone's written into the chat.
I can share something.
Please.
Hi. One thing I noticed, and it had to do with something you said earlier on, about if we didn't know anything, what would we make? And this being in this practice, it was like, if I didn't have an agenda, if I didn't have the rules of this is what comes next in the flow, where does my body naturally go? Where am I moved? When do I pause? When do I move? And this sense of the presence in both the stillness and the movement, and in the unknown, that there's like a liberation in that of not knowing what comes next.
That's right.
And allowing myself to be in the stillness long enough for my body to show me what comes next instead of my mind.
Beautifully said. I mean, that's definitely the practice. Thank you so much. And I often think of it like you described it so well. I think of it as kind of a restorative justice project. That all, the mind has the voice, the mind says, do this, do that. And it is often quite judgmental about the body. It doesn't like it. It doesn't like its size. It doesn't like its functioning. It's not functioning quite right or whatever. There's this kind of, active voice of the mind, whereas the body has a quieter voice unless it's injured or sick, right? Then it becomes quite loud. But oftentimes the relationship is uneven. So in this case, we're asking the mind to step back and be quieter so that the body has a more prominent voice, and the body's knowing can be more part of our conversations. So it's just trying to make this a more balanced person, and then and that we honor this kind of body knowing, sensing, knowing more. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thing is this awareness, right? Awareness. And so sometimes we do this little at-home practice. So this is sitting, as we've just pointed out. And then there's, then we can stand, right? So we did this before, sit, stand. And then, in our basic vocabulary that we do every day, then we turn. So this is quite a different feeling. If I'm here, I feel a certain way. I have a certain scenery that includes all of you. Or I can turn away and walk. So we always say about breaks that there isn't any break from your body until you pass on. You're always can't take a break from your body. And you can't take a break from your environmental setup, your connection to the world. So let's take this break, but it's a little bit of being able to bring along not only your personal embodiment, but your spatial awareness, as we get some water or take a little time. I don't mind going a little longer so that you actually do look out the window or get outside and have actual little bit of your body connecting to this awareness. Is that okay if we
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
longer?
yeah. 10 minutes.
A personal life as well. That this capacity to be comfortable with not knowing, or actually developing an appetite for a certain kind of panic, I guess you could say. When there's unknown, there's a kind of like, the kind of now what? And much of this work, when you get into ensemble, so we could say in the little bit we practice together, that when we're still, we call that a sculpture. And oftentimes in our work, it's sculpture 1 to sculpture 2. So Angel maybe could say a little bit about some work that we did in Los Angeles, must have been a couple of years ago, in which we were able to apply this to the several hundred people in a ballroom. But it's something that you might be able to use in your contexts. And Jennifer said she was there. So it was it's partially our gathering today is was this generous invitation from Angel that we could talk a little bit about the work and maybe do a little something. But it's also, I always have kind of a hidden agenda, which is I would love it if people brought this into their actual context, that there was something about it that was interesting enough in terms of how to bring the body into our conversations, into our particularly difficult conversations, that that we have a little bit of skill of doing that. And so I was going to ask Angel if you wanted to say something about what we did in LA, or to set that up, and I could say a little bit about how we applied this to that.
So really quickly, what we did in LA, it was in Los Angeles. It was a conference called Timeless Wisdom, Timely Action, I believe, and my role in it was to facilitate an experience where we visually saw 400 years of US history on these like 20 by 4 foot timelines. We had about 4 of them stretched out throughout the room. There were about 230 people. And we had instructed them to just gently, slowly walk through the panels, the banners, and then the timelines had images and texts that really told the story of how we've entrenched and legalized inequality in the United States, whether it be racial inequality, gender inequality, sexual orientation, and but we instructed people to do it in silence. So I only framed that because people did it in silence and then journaled. So there was so much feeling. There was so much in their bodies already charged. And we held the space safe and brave enough so that people can stay in the discomfort of sitting with this 400-year legacy. And then once I transitioned out of that experience, Arawana came in and did a social presencing practice that allowed people to kind of sense into what was coming up for them in sculpture 1. And then we paired people up in small groups, and then they basically made like a shape of what they were feeling, and I believe what they were what they would like to change, and it was just powerful to be, I mean, it was 5 hours. We were together like for 5 hours, and it felt like it was a minute, and then it also felt like it was a whole week in just that time period. So that's all I'll say to contextualize that very concentrated portal, really, of experience. And let me know if you want me to share anything else, but that might give you enough to take it to the next level.
Yeah, thank you, Angel. I think that what the invitation was, after people had, we had almost like a pilgrimage. People were quiet and they moved in groups of 20, kind of so that everybody could rest and see the images. So the timeline is images of photos and images, and also historic events of, particularly of inequality over these 400 years. And so all sorts of feeling comes up and for people. And it was more like a pilgrimage, like a ritual pilgrimage. They moved in groups of 20 through these 3 visual panels. After which then there was a sense of how this could be the basis for kind of going forward in terms of this. The theme of the conference had to do with engagement, right? So we asked, they were in groups of 3 or 4, and they just was strangers, right? We didn't know each other. They were just went with 2 people or 3 people near you. And they were asked to not think about or make a judgment about their own experience or anything about this experience, but just right now, what shape would your body take if you just let whatever the experiences wash over you and not think about what it means, but what is the actual engagement, and physically, what does it feel like? And it's not like psychodrama where you act something out emotionally, particularly. It's more like, is there weight pressing down, or do you feel like, pulling away from something? Or do you feel like you're conflicted in your loyalties? Like it's more a sense of the feeling of almost forces that are systemic on us, right? There's nobody, so we call this a kind of stuck situation or a current reality situation, because nobody's stuck by themselves, right? It's all in systems thinking, systems approach. It's always in relationship to others and to decisions and to power and to both inner, what we might think of inner or psychological stuck places, as well as external factors. So each person embodied this in their little group of 3 or 4, and the others held witness, like the others just quietly watch and kind of sense what this person offers, right? So that it's just suspending your thoughts about what it means or projecting any meaning on them, but just trying to open up in an empathic way to the felt resonance of whatever body shape they offer. It doesn't matter at all what it is. And then they create a little group sculpture. So each one of them then embodies their shape with the others, right? So that they can feel that their sculptures are in a kind of tableau, or they could be in a group sculpture if they're touching one another, And we call this sculpture 1. It's where we're starting. It's where the story is right now. And sometimes that could be just your current situation. In this case, what is it that we experience now? We did this recently at on a presencing, big open presencing gathering, in which we said kind of what was said earlier. How do you feel right now? The pandemic has been going on and it affects all of us. How does it, right today, this moment, what does it feel like in your body, this sense of it? So in this case, we did it around this shared experience that we had. And then collectively, the 4 people together could move without thinking about this. Where do they move to? Where do they just like you did, we practiced from our shape, we moved. But in this case, we're also including the other 3 with us. We move into a second shape, we stop, and then each person shares a word or a phrase that just emerges out of this activity of moving from sculpture 1 to sculpture 2. What is that little journey? What does it have to say? And again, just one word or a phrase. That little activity, which lasts, a couple of minutes, it triggers then a conversation. Then it opens into just 4 people talking about their experience. But rather than, go to the concept of what this means and how, what they feel and this and that, it keeps it more grounded in a collective kind of opening into what we often feel is a deeper level of conversation. It boycotts the habit to go into downloading around politics or around a view. I have a view on this, and either finding people that agree with us or having people that disagree, whatever. It bypasses that into kind of a shared journey on a physical level, which then sets up a conversation which has a little bit more depth, and breaks the habits. It breaks habits of just kind of falling into downloading in a conventional, acceptable, conventional, habitual way, which is just not very innovative. So that was the practice, and something that was easily done with many people. And they had to be willing to jump in and try, which they were. And also there are various degrees of how people can open up and be more kind of vulnerable in that kind of position, which we know. But in general, there's a welcoming and a trusting environment that feels that people could take a chance and try something new. And that often is our situation in either very large groups or in small groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be an example, and something that you could use with yourself, just individually, or with your teams.
Yeah. It was quite profound. Ken,
invite a person, if you don't, to just sit there and do nothing with you. and you notice how that your mind is thinking. You notice that, of course, but you notice it in moments when it isn't. Right? It's not continuous. And mindfulness or embodiment is just breaking a habit of always going to the mind and saying that this body, it also has wisdom. Doing nothing has wisdom. Not knowing has wisdom. So it's partially your modeling that. Like this is in my case, because I don't know the answer to that question other than to say, okay, right now, like it's a kind of hanging out, doing nothing. And it's valuing that. So just little by little like that, with that ordinariness, it's just ordinary. It's just that we forget to be ordinary. We have to be so sophisticated these days. And I'm not sure that that's what completely we need on the planet right now. So it's a very good question though, and I'm sure others in the group have also worked with this and would know how to have your own ways of doing this. But the other thing that maybe came out of this story, in the evening after this, we had a dinner, and John Kabat-Zinn was there. He was also attended this, and he said at dinner, I was in a group with these three guys. I've never met them before, and you know, after a few minutes, I just loved these guys.
Mm.
We just loved one another. Now, how does that happen?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So there's something about the doing stuff with a person, having positive regard, just being quiet and watching something, and then sharing a little, sort of out of the context of thinking. There's just no, the competition falls away, and the sense of having to be smart falls away. And this kind of ordinary quality comes out where there's natural affection. I think he was pointing to that sort of quality about the work. Yeah. There's this, I'm going to ask you to sort of make a shape, body shape. Just think for a moment about something that's challenging right now. It could be about anything. Just something that is a little bit of a challenge in your life, right? It's a little bit of a stuck place that is not moving forward, not a problem. We don't frame it as a problem. We just say that part of creativity, part of innovation is always that there are obstacles. So there's a little stuck place somewhere in your life or work right now. What is that? If you made a shape and gave that a shape, what would that be? Okay. Again, you don't need to be looking at the screen. You can be eyes closed or somewhere else, but try to give that experience, that challenge, let's say, that obstacle of some sort, give it a shape. Okay, now try to suspend what you think about it or the story. You're dropping the story and feeling the shape. And if the shape had a voice, what word would come out? A word or a short phrase. Just say it to yourself. Try not to think about it. The shape, just let your mind go open and see if a word or a couple words come out. Okay, stay with your shape. Stay with it, stay with it. Feel the back and the feet on the ground. Feel where's the waist, the shoulders, hands, gaze. Okay, now if you just stay with that, stay with it, let go of what you think. Okay, and now let that shape move. Stay with the movement, let it move. Don't think about it, let it move. You don't think, let it move to something moving. It's moving, you're feeling that where it's shifting from something to something else. You don't know what it is. And then I'm going to ask you to settle into another shape, sculpture 2. Okay. Once you get settled there, again, feel into it. If this shape had a voice, this is not you, this is the shape. If the shape had a voice, what would it say? Let whatever comes to mind, first thought, best thought. Say the word or a couple of words. Okay? Exactly. So that's really the method. You can do it with many people, you can do it with yourself. You can get people to reflect back what they experienced when you did it. You can just do it by yourself. I do it all the time. I get fouled up in front of the, too many emails or something, and I just get up and make a shape for what that feels like, and I let that shape move, because nobody, stuck is not sustainable. It's not a sustainable situation. Everything in nature moves. So that little practice can move us towards our conclusion here. It's almost as though that were our this little opening into the end of our time, which is now. And I guess I only have the time to say thank you for all of you coming and for being invited. And we often, and maybe Angel, you want to say something to end, but we often make a gesture or something like that to at the end, just to make our checkout gesture.
Mm.